Thanks for joining us. And what we're going to be doing today is talking about Schlossberg's transition theory. And as always, please feel free to interrupt with questions, or if you have a story that really illustrates the point, we'd love to hear it. This is meant as much as a delivery of content as it is for an opportunity for you all to learn from each other. And just really want to thank you for joining us today. So without any further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. Nancy Schlossberg was a professor. She's now a professor emeritus at the University of Maryland. She's written a number of books. Most recently, she's written a number of books about retirement and how you can set yourselves up for retirement. But she's all about change, and she's given this transition theory a framework, which we'll be going through today. Currently, she's the president of Transition Works, which is an organization that's online. And you can actually, I'll show you some of the resources that are available online through her website. So transitions, as we're going to talk about today, are any event or non-event, and we'll discuss the difference there, that results in changes to relationships, routines, assumptions, and roles. So that's how she defines change and or transitions, and we'll be dealing with that. Now, the beauty of what she has done is she has given the theory, she's given a framework for us to understand, to be able to break it down and to then analyze the different parts of any transition, and then to identify areas that need attention. So it's really a framework, and it identifies, first of all, the types of transition, and we'll go through these in a minute, but there are anticipated, unanticipated, and non-events. She also goes through the phases of transition. There's a move-in period, there's a moving through, and then there's a moving out period. And one thing that she stresses in her book, and her book I highly recommend, it's called Overwhelmed, and everything from this presentation is out of that book specifically. She has other books, and parts of it are in others as well. But if you bought this one book, came out in 2009, it would have all this information in it. But one of the things that she repeats over and over in all of her materials is now is not forever, meaning that your feelings are going to change over time as you transition through this transition, and things get better. And she has a number of illustrations, and she does a lot with the book that shows that it gets better. Okay, the areas affected, as we talked about in the definition itself, were relationships, routines, assumptions, and roles. And we'll go into more detail on that as well. And then there are these four variables that are important. They're the four S's. We'll go through that as well. And then in the book and in all her materials, she gives strategies for managing change as well, and we'll go through that. So I really just want to impress upon you, it's a framework. It allows you to kind of compartmentalize transition, and then to be able to identify what areas are strengths that can be used as resources, and what areas are deficits and need to be attended to so that the transition can go more smoothly. And we're as career counselors, we're integrally involved in transitions. That's what we do. We help people transition from one job to another. And there are three types of transition. There's the anticipated transition, such as graduating high school and then matriculating to college. That's an anticipated transition. And getting married, having children, getting a job, changing jobs can all sometimes be anticipated. There are the unanticipated. These are things that obviously life just hits you with. Illness, death in the family, being fired from the job being terminated, the company going belly up, whatever the case may be. So there's unanticipated. And then there is the non-event. And this is really a strength of this model, is it includes this idea that there are anticipated events that don't happen, and she calls those non-events. So, and this is where a lot of our students live. This is They graduated from high school. They didn't get into college. Now they're living at home playing video games in the basement. They graduated from college, didn't get a job, and now they're languishing. And so this idea of the non-event is important to this transition theory, and we'll go into more detail on those as well.
Failure to launch.
Yeah, that's really, I mean, the non-events, the failure to launch is a non-event. The expected anticipated event is that they launch and they become independent, and then they find themselves not independent. They have failed to launch, or they're in the emerging young adult category. Questions to this point?
Not a question, but a point I'm thinking about is that these non-events sometimes, particularly in my practice, are looking like needing to take a gap year, needing to take a break, needing to kind of relook at things, and then parents kind of having to readjust to this idea that this is not what was anticipated.
Excellent point, Annette. And you're jumping to the end, and that's reframing, refocusing. No, you're perfect. I mean, you get it. And that is a strategy for dealing with the non-event, is that reshaping of a new identity, that refocusing on a new goal. Okay. So absolutely, you're 100% correct. That's how you help the non-events. Excellent. Okay, so the four variables that are involved, Schlossberg calls them the four S's. And those are the situation. What are the circumstances of this transition? We'll go into more detail on each of these. I'm just going to give you the four S's. So there are the circumstances, what's actually happening. Then there's who is it happening to? How is that person able to manage this change? They're a variable. Then there's the support mechanisms that they have available to them. That's a critical component of transition. Who's there to help them? And then what strategies do they have to manage this change? What kind of coping mechanisms do they have? Now, all of these variables, the strength of this is that there can be described, analyzed, and identified with a positive or negative or neutral designation. And this allows you to play up the positives and to focus on the negative areas. And those are the areas of the intervention, which will help you change what it is that's going on with them. All right, so we're going to look at each of these individually. So we've got situation. Now, the situation, is this an anticipated, unanticipated, or non-event? That's the first thing that you're asking. Then you're asking what triggers it. Is the timing good, bad? Who is in control of it? Were they in control? Are they moving from, to college and they have control over whether they're doing that? Or is it involuntary? They didn't get into college, so they're not going to college. The role change, is there a role change? Are they going from being a high school student to a college student, or from a college student to a young adult and that's independent? Have they gained or lost in this? If they were a college student and then failed out, now they're at home, they've lost the independence, they've lost the identity of being a college student. Now their identity is a college dropout. And how can you help them reframe that, refocus, and move forward? Then we've got duration. How long is it going to last? And has this happened before? Do they have some skills? Have they done this? Do they have a similar situation on which they can draw from? And then there is this idea of load versus liability. And the load versus liability basically is illustrated by, is this load too big for them? Is this more than they can handle? Or is this something that they can handle rather easily? So that's that load versus liability. And that's something that you're trying to evaluate, how precarious this situation is. Obviously, when the load exceeds their liabilities, that's when they need more support. We don't often see the kids who are easily handling it because they're already at college. So our focus is really on those kids who are struggling with gaining independence or being successful in college or in a job market or so forth. Any questions? I'm going to go back. Situation. Any questions about the situation? Nope. Okay, good. So then we have self. Okay, who is going through this transition? What is their mental and physical health? What strengths and deficits do they bring to the situation? Do they believe they have options? Are they optimistic about these changes? And who are they? How old are they? Where do they live? Their socioeconomic, their racial, and so forth. I'll just add as a nerdy aside, one of the criticisms of this framework is that there has not been enough attention paid to race and gender. And a lot of people love this framework, but just wish that there was more that would help the socioeconomic or other minority groups. So anyway, just throw that in there. So that's important. Who are they? And then there is the supports. Do they have family members, friends, coworkers, supervisors, counselors? Are they receiving financial support somewhere? Is there some kind of institutional support? Do they have a high school where they can go back to the counselor and get more counseling, even though they've graduated that high school? Is the college career center willing to help them even if they have dropped out? Is that available or not? If they've left a job, or if they've been fired from a job, do they have a parachute of some sort? Do they have any kind of package that would help them transition? And how is the individual receiving this support? And then the support that they're receiving, is it positive, negative, or neutral? They may be receiving support from their parents, but their parents may not be being it may not be a positive type of support. Maybe they did all their applications for college. Maybe they did all their homework in high school. Now they're in high school and being unsuccessful, and their parents are continuing maybe to try and snowplow for them. And that's while it's a loving family member and they're giving support, it may not be support that is helpful. And so that has to be evaluated. And then the last S is strategies. And this is, do they have coping strategies and how many? Because we know from research that the most successful students or people, period, have the greatest number of strategy mechanisms, coping mechanisms, and they can use them flexibly and creatively to make their situation better, reframe their situation, move through and past whatever transition there is. And can the person creatively cope with, and I'm going to go into more detail about how they might change their situation, how they might change the meaning of their situation, and how they might manage their reaction to the stress. Those are all strategies that we'll get to in the end. So in 1995, Schlossberg, or before I move on, sorry, any questions about the four S's? Nope.
No.
Okay. Great.
Dan, are you going to get into maybe the grid score for self? Are you going to get into that? Or?
Yeah, when we go through evaluation of each, I think that's
Okay.
a good idea. Okay. So in 1995, Schlossberg married her framework with the Cormier Hackney model for assisting individuals with transition. And without going into too much detail about that, there are 5 stages to the Cormier Hackney model. And that is, first, you build relationships. You listen empathetically. You understand their circumstances, and you have a rapport with them. Then you assess where they are. And in her case, it's the assessment of those 4 S's. And then you set goals. And then you give interventions. And then there is termination and follow-up. So it's a pretty straightforward counseling model. And it is how we do it in the Greenwood stages of the Greenwood system. The way we go through this assisting individuals with transition, because that's what we do, we first have the structured interview and the values clarification. That first interview is where you're building that relationship and you're understanding their values and you're understanding their aspirations through their clarification of their values. The Greenwood assessment and the self-exploration that you do with the clients give them that assessment of who they are, their personality, values, interests, and abilities. So those are the areas that we focus on in our assessment and in our self-exploration. Then we obviously do the career exploration and build an action plan. So the career exploration helps them identify those jobs for which they're interested in, and then the action plan is built upon that. So the goal is to have them matriculate into those careers, and the action plan gives them more immediate goals that they can do to further their progress towards that goal. And then the interventions, we ask them to continue to conduct research and do informational interviews to find out more about those careers and what it takes to be successful in them, and to then get the education or training required for them to enter those fields. And then we also have termination and follow-up. So when you look at the Schlossberg model of actual assisting, actual counseling, and our system of counseling, this is how we work through that same set of goals. Any questions about that or comments? Okay, great. All right, so now we have the coping strategies. And this is where we're helping them deal with the change. Now, Perlin and Schuler have coping strategies grouped together in 3 different types, and Schlossberg adopts this model. And there are those strategies, those coping mechanisms that help the individual change the situation, just change the mechanics of it, change the dynamics of the situation. There are things they can do to change what's happening to them. And then there's ways that they can't change the situation, but maybe they can change the meaning of it. They can reframe it. And then there are ways that they can just manage their stress during this transition, things that they can do to help them relax. So there are these 3 kind of categories or types of coping structures. So we'll take the first one, changing the situation. So they want to actually change the dynamics. There's negotiation. Maybe there's a way they can talk to somebody and they can change the dynamics. It can be negotiated. They're in a situation, but through negotiations, they can get back. Maybe they can talk to the dean of students and get back into school and negotiate their way back into school. So that'd be a type of negotiation that you could help them manage. There's also taking optimistic action. Maybe that school wasn't right for them, so you help them apply to a different school. That's forward moving. It's optimistic. It's continuing along the same vein. They can seek advice. Maybe they talk to someone at the school and they have a way that they can advise them. If you do this, that, and the other thing, then your circumstances would be different. Sometimes the situation that they find themselves in is one where they're being taken advantage of, and through their own self-assertion, they can change the dynamics of the situation. There is brainstorming a new plan. Again, this is coming up with something else to do, as opposed to just living with the situation as it is. And then there's the ability to take legal action if required or necessary or appropriate. So those are strategies that you can help the student change their situation. Then we've got the strategies. Before I go, sorry, I should stop. Any other thoughts that people can think of, how you might change the situation, things that you've done? Okay. Then there's changing the meaning. So the mechanics, the situation, the dynamics are the same, but through applying knowledge of transition process, you can change the meaning of it, and that's kind of what we're doing here. But more, you can also rehearse. She talks about rehearsing or visualizing the change. So actually, before the change happens, picturing in your mind what the routines are going to be like, what the relationships are going to be like, what the assumptions you will have, what role you'll play. You can actually rehearse those things, and through rehearsing it, you can help change the meaning of it and actually be more successful in it. You can also develop rituals. Now, this one I liked because this is unusual, but she talks about how there are lots of transitions that aren't celebrated anyway. We do celebrate marriage through a big ceremony and a party, and we
Graduation.
graduations we celebrate, and deaths we have wakes, and there are all these transitions that we have, but and they're ritualized. But there are a lot of transitions that are not ritualized. Things like the 18-year-old who moves out and gets a job instead of going to college. We don't have a party for that. You don't often get a greeting card from that. And she's saying that can be celebrated and very successfully, and you can rechange the meaning of that by saying, hey, our daughter is going to go out and get a job, and she's going to live on her own. We're having a party. Come bring a present.
Or
Our
do a gap year or go to community college. Yeah.
Yeah. So it can be celebrated. She uses the example of the woman who decides she's not going to find Mr. Right, and she's not going to get married, but she's going to have great friends and throw great parties. So she actually has a party for that. There are things that you can ritualize that would change the meaning of it from maybe something that's stigmatized to something that is celebrated. And in doing so, you can really help them with that change, with that transition to that new reality. So then there's also making positive comparisons, taking your situation and saying, well, I've still got it a lot better than these people. I'm very thankful that I have family and friends that are helping me. I know other people are going through this that don't have that. And so by really recognizing and really bringing it to their consciousness that the things that they do have in their advantage, by making the positive comparisons, is a way for them to change some of the meaning and take away some of the negative aspects. There's rearranging priorities. So if this isn't working out, shift your focus. She uses the example of, if your job's not going well, focus on your family. While you get a new job. If your family's not going well, maybe then your marriage isn't going well. Maybe you start focusing more on your career and changing your priorities a little bit. Again, minimizing those transitions which are difficult and prioritizing those things which you're being successful in. Labeling and reframing is exactly what we do. I mean, that's where we say, yes, you're not going to college. It's not for you. Let's find a new thing for you to do. Let's reframe this and let's help you transition to that new alternative. And we'll get into a little bit more in detail about how that works with a non-event, which I know is really our bread and butter, really who we see as clients. They're selectively ignoring, and along with that, using denial. She actually says there's a mature way to use denial or to ignore, and that can change the meaning. Again, you're helping them minimize things that are problematic, and you're helping them refocus, relabel, reframe, and move forward. There's using humor. That's obviously a go-to for a lot of people. And then for some people, faith really helps them in their transitions. And so that's a potential resource that people can draw on if they have that strong faith component as part of their being. So that's changing the meaning. And then the last of the categories was that managing your reaction to stress. And for that, she says, playing is great. Adults forget to go have fun, and uses the example of this college that partnered with a retired organization, and the college students would get together with the retirees, and they would play. They'd play games, they'd watch movies, they'd play board games, and they just had a great time. And it was really helpful to managing that stress. Then you've got relaxation skills like mindfulness, meditation, or getting massages. Those things all help manage stress. Expressing emotion can be a great stress reliever. Having a good cry can really help manage that stress and should be allowed and given space and encouraged if that's going to be helpful. Then you've got doing physical activities. Some people exercise a lot to get that energy out and to really help them manage their their stress. And then you've got obviously participating in counseling, therapy, support groups, leveraging the services of those of us who would help frame this and really help them get through this situation. And then reading, both as an escape and entertainment, but also through self-help books, motivational books or inspirational books or biographies about people who are going through similar circumstances. That can both inspire, but also give ideas about what next to do. So reading is also an excellent
And
redeemer.
even fiction, I would throw out, Dan.
Yeah, fiction's that escape, that entertainment and escape value.
It's actually not even escape, it's identification. There is so much good fiction out there right now that is depicting these situations that are not the norm, that are not what society expects of you, and things turn out well.
Yeah, good. Can anyone else think of others? That's excellent, Ken. Thank you. Can anyone else think of other stress relievers?
Actually, I would like to piggyback onto the volunteering is huge in every community. I encourage clients, Ronald McDonald House, sponsor bingo night, volunteer at a soup kitchen. It goes back to those positive comparisons you were talking about. See what is out there, see how you can help. I think that's such a big booster to one's morale and feeling better about where they are. And it's also, you just feel so good about yourself.
Right. Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah, I agree. I think the gift of giving is a really important tool that too often we don't rely upon. If you can get back into the business of giving and thinking about people with different problems, it kind of can put your own problems and your own changes into perspective. And there's lots of research that shows that when you're giving and giving of your time, giving of your resources to people, you actually get more back than the person that's getting those things. There's a lot of self-satisfying chemicals that get released in your body when you do that. But I was also going to add to what Kim was saying, that I often will try to re-story with looking at what would it be like to go 5 years from now and look back at these circumstances and re-look at them and be able to see that they were great, that they happened to you. And I often use my own personal stories and some of my clients' stories where really crappy, shitty, terrible, horrible things were happening. And then lo and behold, 2, 3, 4 years from now, those things seem to be the mechanisms that created this really beautiful thing that needed to happen. So, the more we can bring perspective to our lives and look back on things and in the moment go, what if whatever this horrible, terrible, bad thing is actually good? What if I were to story it that way? What would that possibly mean? And clients are amazing at figuring that out. They come up with, like, maybe this would be like a step to my new career, or maybe this would be like, I'm going to meet the man of my dreams. So just using their own restoring of the future from that, time capsule that we went forward and we were going to come back and meet, Annette today, what would I tell her?
Excellent.
Well, and
Yeah.
our biggest learning experiences are our failures. Period. End
Period. Yes.
story.
Full stop. Yep. Absolutely. Yep.
Absolutely. I tell people all the time, I learned everything with mud on my face.
That's right.
Put it.
Love it. Love it. I'm going to use that. All right. The other strategy, now this is not part of the Schuler method. She added this, but she said there is some times where you should actually intentionally do nothing. That is a strategy in itself. It's not often talked about, but sometimes it's very effective. Just like that selective ignoring and mature use of denial. Sometimes not every problem needs attention. Jerry Brown said the other day, not every human problem requires a law. You know, so sometimes it just needs to not happen. All right. So
Dan, just to interject, I find that, for example, in the gap year dynamics, there's a lot of downtime that happens, say, over the holidays, for example, and a lot of times parents want to respond to that and say, well, what are they doing? And you just, in a way, they're incubating. It's a little bit of a do nothing time. Let it all settle in.
Oh, that's that's excellent. So yeah, giving them space for some downtime. I like that.
And actually, the words that I give it, sit with it. Just,
Yep.
You've learned something, sit with it, internalize it. Yep.
Yep.
Mhm.
Great.
I'm
All right.
trying to think of the name of that model for change where the first step is, I'm thinking of the wrong words right now, who it is, but the first step is that nothing's happening. You don't even know change is happening yet. And then the next stage is pre-contemplation, or maybe it's pre-contemplation where you kind of don't know something's happening. So I like the sit with it. I like just kind of, let it stew, let it unfold. Sometimes even in parenting, we often, my husband and I use the technique of, let's not say no. Maybe another parent will say no first. And then we won't have to look like the bad parents. We'll just be like, oh, you guys can't drive to New York for that concert. Wow. Okay. Well, darn it. So.
Okay.
I think it's Praskovsky. Is that his name?
That's it.
Stages of Change.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Nice.
Is it? Who is it? Lewin? Did you say Lewin? Who's?
Brachowski? I'm not sure if I'm saying the name.
Yeah, it is. It's yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Great. All right. So let's dive a little deeper into these non-events, these situations where there was an expected transition which didn't take place. And again, I think this is really where a lot of our clients come from. And there are, in Schlossberg's model, there are 4 types. There is the personal non-event, and that's where aspirations were unrealized. They've missed some kind of milestone. Maybe they didn't graduate from high school. Maybe they've fallen prey to drug use. Maybe they didn't get into college. And when we think about the impact that has on relationships, it's huge. I mean, their friend relationships change. Their friends all go off to college and they don't. Their teachers now see them differently. They didn't graduate high school. Their parents are now dealing with it differently. So the relationships are very different. And then you have their assumptions are changing. They used to think of themselves as someone who is capable. Now their assumptions are that maybe they're a failure. And their routines, they used to go to school, now they're in the basement. That's changed. Their role has changed from being a student to now not being a student. So everything is upended: routines, relationships, assumptions. And so that's terribly distressing. And that's where we find them. So, and when we think about that as being personal, that's something that sometimes happens to them for whatever reason. There's also the ripple effect. Maybe they were headed to college, but they lost a parent and now they have to help take care of siblings, or there's not money for college. So it's not anything that happened to them, but because this major catastrophic event happened to somebody else, they're getting caught up in this ripple effect. Then there's the resultant. This could be, the college that they're going to folds, and now they don't have a college because it was a for-profit school and it lost its accreditation, and now they've got to recover credits, and now they've got to retool and everything. But again, it's not anything they did. They were a perfectly fine student. They were doing what they were supposed to be doing, but some other event resulted in them going through this transition. And then you've got the delay. Now, this is where we hope all of our non-event students are, that this is simply just a delay, that they've had to take a break, they've had to go to detox, they've had to kind of work through their mental health issues. And so they didn't go to college with everyone else, or they didn't become independent like all of their friends. But this is just a delay in their development, and we're going to get them back on track and get them independent, get them being a high functioning member of society and realizing their dreams. So those are the 4 types of non-events. And the strategies for, can anyone else, well, they also overlap too. I mean, the ripple and the resultant are somewhat tied together, so we don't need to kind of delve into this too much. But these strategies for dealing with these non-events through the Schlossberg model is, first, she calls it discovering. Give it a name, tell the story, demystify it, clarify it, pull it up so that it's in front of everybody, so that everyone can kind of look at this thing in 3 dimensions and understand where, why, how it came about. And that's helped through the kind of clarification of situation. As you go through the situation, that first S, and you kind of demystify it. Like, here's where we are. This is what we're dealing with. Then, she says the grieving part is often overlooked because people don't think about grieving not getting a job or grieving not going to college. But it is a loss, and it should be acknowledged, and you should deal with it. And by allowing that opportunity to, really deal with the loss of getting married or the loss of a job or whatever it is that precipitated this situation, look at it, demystify it, and deal with the loss, and then let it go. And then there's the refocusing. So once you've been able to put that bag of bricks down, you can begin to identify new goals, create new dreams, reshape the future, reshape a new vision, and then return to the 4 S's of situation, strategy, support, and self, and analyze, evaluate. Now, of course, this is where we live, in that kind of refocusing, reshaping. This is where the Greenwood system really comes into being. And depending on the situations of your clients, you may need to go through that discovery and grieving process and help them come to terms with their situation. And then using the Greenwood system, you can really help them identify new goals and dreams and reframe their new future and their new vision. And then you can use the 4 S's to help you identify those areas that you may need to help them with, those areas that they have deficits. Maybe the support systems need to be worked on, or maybe they need to reframe it and go through all those strategies that we just went through. How does that look for everyone?
Looks great. Guys, I'm so sorry. I've got to run. I've got to head to my office, and I've got another phone call I've got to get on.
Janet, thanks for joining us. And
yeah, but I can catch up on this because it's going to be recorded, correct?
It is going to be recorded. You'll be able to pick up from here 40 minutes in and pick up there.
Fantastic.
Great.
It was everybody.
Bye, Janet.
Bye.
Bye, Jan.
So now let's look at Schlossberg actually has some resources that you can use. She has an online resource which is available at www.transitionguide.com. And it is an online, you can basically buy access to this, send your client a link, and then your client can go through and answer there's 56 questions. And if you look really closely, it's things like, I feel a sense of control or mastery as I face transitions. And on the left, it's never. And on the right, it's always. And this is the part of the website dealing with self. Okay, so there's 4 different sections, 56 questions in all. And you can have the client go through and select each of these, and then it produces a report. They can send it to you. It identifies areas of concern, deficits, and makes suggestions. That is $12 per administration. You can buy it in bulk, and it gets down to about $8. But if you wanted to do something online, you could go to this, you register in a matter of seconds, you log on, then you can buy reports, and then you can send them to your client. They can take them, and it produces a 2-page report, which they can send to you if they choose to, and that will help do that. The other option is to buy the book. And the book, at the end of every chapter, at the end of Self, you can see it asks a series of questions, and you could create your own forms out of the book, and sit down with them and answer them, which actually, first of all, it's less expensive because you're not doing $12 per administration, and secondly, it can generate conversation with them. So as they're answering it, you can ask follow-up questions. But through this, either the evaluation that's in the book or through the online, you can go through a series of questions that would then help you determine whether the area of self or which aspects of self are areas of deficit and which ones are strengths. And it allows you to kind of deconstruct the transition in those 4 variables and identify strengths and weaknesses.
Dan, which one of her books is it?
It's the Overwhelmed Coping with, here.
It's underneath.
It's right here. So,
Okay.
yeah. So the resources that I used for this obviously were the GS 120 assessment and process. The book that all of this is referencing is Nancy Schlossberg's Overwhelmed Coping with Life's Ups and Downs. It was revised in 2008. I think the first edition was in 1994. And then she revised it with it taking into account, the recession and 9/11 and, the gig economy. So she really updated it with stories that feel more current than they did in 1994. And then the website, as I mentioned, is the transitionguide.com. Great. So what do you guys think? Any questions? Any thoughts? Anything you've been waiting for me to say that I haven't that you think other people should hear?
Dr. Greenwood, honestly, one of my biggest takeaways from this, I love the idea of celebrating unusual transitions, making new rituals. I think that in this day and age, we're uniquely poised for that to be accepted and okay. With TV shows like 13 Reasons Why, telling children why somebody committed suicide, I just think our society is more open to doing things like that. And I think that's a great tool.
I completely agree, Kim. I think it's exciting. I like this part of my job particularly, is just helping people find they come in and they hated their job and everybody was terrible, horrible, awful. It was the worst experience of their life. And then they got fired and they're devastated. And it's like, you got fired from a bunch of jerks. Yay!
Exactly right. Start over. Yeah.
How to celebrate that. I remember an old friend of mine got turned down for something really big he was searching for and trying to get approval for, and when he got the rejection letter, he decided to go, yay, we don't fit with them, let's make our own thing. So they had a big celebration party and came up with their own model, and now people want to be a part of their system. So you know, it's hard to make that shift, but if you can help that, I think families really struggle. I know we struggled. Emily, my daughter, took a gap year, and everybody thought she'd be, you know, off to college or doing this. And boy, you get a lot of eye rolls when you're like, no, she's working. She's just working right now. Yeah, she's thinking about it. So it's interesting how our culture can put a real negative spin on something that could be incredibly positive for someone.
I mean, just the rise of a divorce moon. I mean, what instead of a honeymoon? Or yeah, I sent my kid to South America to dig ditches. Yeah, you know what? That can be life altering and amazing.
Good.
Celebrate it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great.
This was a highly informative, and it was a good like recount. It brought me back to things I haven't thought about putting out in these terms. I really feel more structured because of this today. I appreciate it very much.
I'm glad to do it. Yeah, thanks for logging on.
The only thing I wanted to mention was, you know, you have a sense of self in the grit score on the GS 120. You know, if you look at their grit score, it'll tell you a little bit about the self. And then, yeah, that was the biggest one I was thinking of.
Right.
So in other words, how apt they are to recover and find a new path?
Yeah,
It's how. Go ahead.
The grit score is Dr. Duckworth's work out of the University of Pennsylvania, and it basically has it's a sense of how they can maintain interest over a long period of time and how they can overcome obstacles. And then a third aspect of it is their ambition. So it's a self-report, and it's very useful because it shows you whether they're all over the map, just getting distracted by, you know, the next shiny thing, or whether they're laser-like focus and they have the ability to be interested in something 6 months or a year from now, and they have the ability to overcome obstacles.
Nice. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, very good point.
Great. Thank you so much for joining. And again, you'll have access to this. Hey, Stephanie, I just saw you turned your
Yeah, just to say thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank
You're welcome. All right, guys.
Great.
I'll post this, and I look forward to seeing you guys at the next one. All right, guys. Thanks so much, and take care. Happy New Year.